inside the 10. Carr tips it in and it's Wall. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offensively taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Waterboy Experience. I am your host, the Waterboy himself, Davis McLemore, and we're going to call this basically a lackadaisical edition of the Waterboy Experience because we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in the first half of this. We're basically going to talk about Formula One qualifying, nondescript motorsports, and Jason actually has a few NFL questions he wants to answer me because other than the combine, there's not a whole lot going on. And then in the second half of this, it's going to be Jason by himself recording a race review, basically right after it happens. But like, when is the race? When do you think the race is going to end? Like, what time?
So for me, at the central time zone that I'm at, it's going to start at 9 a.m.
Really quick, let me cut you off real here. The CEO and CFO of Night Productions, the Red Bull chugging son of a gun, Mr. Jason Sadix. Jason, how are you?
I'm very good, but like I say, it starts at 9 a.m. for me, and it usually lasts about 2 hours, so it'll be done by 11 at the most. I can't remember if it starts at 9 or 8, so it's either going to be 10 or 11 when it ends, and I'm going to be at work, so I'm going to have to do the review at 7 o'clock at night.
So, you know, it's the same day turnaround, basically. Do you want to open up talking about qualifying first?
Well, not necessarily start by talking about qualifying. What I do want to talk about is just what's been going on leading up to qualifying, because practice is just as important right now because we don't know, well, I kind of know at this point how the cars are doing, and I just want to give the people an update on, is the Aston Martin really living up to its hype? Because right now that thing is the thing people are most hyped about. Is Fernando Alonso really that good? Is he going to get P1? Which, spoiler, he didn't get P1, but he got close enough. So let's start by talking about some news. After his biking incident during the winter break, it was left unclear whether Lance Stroll would be in good enough shape to make the season opener in Bahrain. Aston Martin, in preparation, had the reserve driver Felipe Drugovich take his place during preseason testing, but alas, he won't get his moment in the spotlight as Stroll was cleared to race. The Canadian had minor surgery on his right wrist and claimed that after doing a full race stint in the simulator that he felt fine minus a bit of soreness. During practice, onboard radio messages revealed that during one of his stints in free practice 2, his engineer was telling him where he needed to improve on for the next lap. Stroll responded by saying that he couldn't because of his injury. And Lance Stroll is nowhere near as good as Fernando Alonso. That's just the truth of it. Fernando has been doing this since 2002. Lance has been doing this since 2017. So Fernando is already good, and he's way better than Lance could ever be. And now with that injury, it seems that it's causing a bit of a pain because, yes, you can last long in the simulator, but the simulator does not simulate the G-force. So I don't think Lance will have a good race result.
Well, and I mean, you also got to take into consideration, Fernando Alonso is a former world champion, correct? Didn't he win 2 of them?
Yes, he broke Michael Schumacher's racing streak.
Well, there you go. And I mean, Lance is still fairly young. Doesn't his dad run the team?
Yes, his dad funded his racing career his entire life, including at Williams, and then bought it from Force India, and it became Racing Point. And then Lawrence Stroll, his father, bought Aston Martin, and then it became Aston Martin Racing. So, yeah, his dad owns the team, which is why Lance will never get fired. And it's why instead of having 2 world champions such as Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso in the team, it's just Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso.
But, I mean, look at him, take his father out of the picture completely. Do you see Lance Stroll as having potential?
I might as well say that Nicholas Latifi will make a comeback and become the Formula One world champion, breaking both Schumacher's and Hamilton's record before Lance Stroll is any good.
Don't drag Latifi into this. This has nothing to do with him. So basically, you're saying Lance Stroll is not good.
He's decent enough, but he's not going to be a world champion, even with a good car.
Well, let's move on to the first American driver. Well, I don't want to say he's the first American driver ever in Formula One, but let's talk about Logan. Logan, what's his name?
Logan Sargent, and no, he's not the first American driver. There's been American drivers since, I think, even in the late 60s, because Mario Andretti was in Formula One for a while. So, no, but his name is Logan Sargent, and he's the latest American. I think the last American in Formula One was Scott Speed.
It's like Speed Racer. That's the most generic racing name ever. But I mean, tell me about how you think he did. My understanding that he did pretty decently in qualifying. He did better than his teammate. So, yeah, how'd he do?
Okay, so you're a little bit mistaken, and that's fine. He didn't do as good as his teammate Alex Albon did, but he qualified 16th and Albon was 15th, which is tremendous because remember, those are Williams. Williams for the last few years has been at the back of the grid, and right now they're 15 and 16, which, you know, it's not in the points, and they're not going to be fighting for podiums or wins or any of that, but they might get into P10 or 9 every now and then. But it's really great for Williams because it shows that they've improved from last year. Unfortunately, if they're not in the back of the grid, well, somebody has to be. And unfortunately, at the very back of the grid is Pierre Gasly.
Who's his teammate?
So Pierre Gasly moved from AlphaTauri to Alpine. So what happened was Pierre Gasly's time was deleted because he went over track limits. And so he was demoted to P20. So he's starting at the back of the grid. But in reality, the last driver is Nick DeVries at P19. And he's the one who replaced him at AlphaTauri. Now, Nick DeVries, he's an amazing driver. He's a Formula E world champion for Mercedes.
But he's a rookie. Isn't he a rookie?
He's 27 years old. But yes, he is in his Formula One rookie season, technically.
Okay, I got you. Continue.
So he is dead last. Next to him is the other rookie, who's an actual rookie, Oscar Piastri, who, if you remember, was at the foot of the controversy that was McLaren buying out Piastri from Alpine. So that was a big thing. And he's P18. Again, he's a rookie. He's just getting used to Formula One. It's a different beast from Formula 2 to Formula 1. But that McLaren is not good. Lando Norris got P11, which sounds great until you realize, oh, wait, McLaren used to be good even in 2021. They won a race. They're not good right now. Honestly, it's a miracle that he got that thing to P11 because they're not doing good, and it seems they're below expectations.
Well, and Lando is one of those racers that I really see as, we've said it multiple times, he's a future world champion, maybe someday. But he's being held back by the team that he's on. And, you know, where we thought, well, McLaren's going to improve the car. No, they made it worse. So I wouldn't be surprised if this season we saw some frustration between McLaren and Lando Norris. Because Lando is in an attitude like, I want to win races now.
His contract, I do believe, comes up this year or either this year or next year. And that's one of the big questions. Will Lando Norris stick to McLaren? Or will he go to another team? Because I'm pretty sure any other team would welcome him. Well, minus Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull, but that's because they have their drivers all set up. So it's a big question. Will he stay at McLaren? They're not doing too hot. And honestly, the last few years, they've kind of been like Manchester United and the Las Vegas Raiders. They promise you a lot of good, and they have great talent, some of the best talents they've had in a very long time. But they just can't win. They're just not good enough. And that's been a problem that's been going on in McLaren for years.
I think he'd go somewhere else and make much more money and have much more success. Now, this is a part of the show where I'm basically going to name it Ferraris and Fuck-Ups. It's going to be a new segment where every week we'll talk about the fuck-ups of Ferrari. Tell us about what happened.
So during qualifying, during the first 10 minutes of Q1, Charles Leclerc was doing a fast lap, and essentially his winglet, which is the wing that's sticking out from the tires, I finally looked it up. It's officially a winglet. That's what it's called. it broke off and it went under the car and caused essentially a red flag, and it probably damaged the underfloor. I mean, it's such typical Ferrari behavior to essentially fuck up as fast as you can and cause a big stir and cause a red flag. That's so like Ferrari. So that happened, and there was a red flag. Q1 was suspended for a little bit, and then they cleaned everything up. And, you know, Charles didn't do too bad. He ended up being P3 after all that. But that is something that now people are questioning. Okay, is the integrity of the car okay? Because this is not the first fuck up Ferrari did. During preseason testing, at the tip of the nose, there was a part of the nose where it actually caved in during the high speeds. And essentially, there was not enough material under it to support it. So when the wind was pushing it at like 180 miles an hour, it sunk in. So now people are like, okay, what's going on with Ferrari? Are they going to be reliable this season? Is the front wing going to fall off mid-race? Is essentially what people are questioning.
I trust my car staying together more than I trust the Ferrari car staying in one piece. Because, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if one day it's not even the engine that's the problem anymore. It's the body of the car. So now, like, you know, stuff will just go flying off of it. It might hit Pierre Gasly all the way in the back. It's just that. What did they make this car out of? Plastic?
Well, I mean, it's made out of carbon fiber. So, yes, it is a type of plastic. No, remember last year, I think it was in Imola, where the engine cover of Fernando Alonso went flying off mid-race after he got hit. So essentially, I think Ferrari is going to pick up where Alpine left, and they're going to be so fucking unreliable. Pieces are going to go flying all the time.
Is there any other teams that we missed? I mean, obviously we have to talk about Red Bull a little bit because Red Bull did exceptionally well. Of course, the reigning world champions.
So I do want to mention that Nico Hülkenberg, who replaced Mick Schumacher. Hülkenberg, as Daniel Ricciardo says, he actually got that piece of shit Haas all the way up to P10. All right, P10. Now, where did his teammate Kevin Magnussen end up? Well, he ended up in P17. Unfortunately, didn't get out of Q1. So now Nico Hülkenberg is the new Kevin Magnussen, and Kevin Magnussen will take up the role of Mick Schumacher. So I wonder if Gunther Steiner is going to treat Kevin bad like he did Mick last season. If you can't tell, I'm still a little bit salty about that. But you did mention it, so let's talk about it. Red Bull Racing, the reigning world champions. Max Verstappen ended up P1 with Checo Perez behind him in P2. Honestly, the way I look at it is just hand him the world championship already. I don't think it's going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be Max dominating with Checo in P2. Maybe, because remember, there's still the drama going on from last year in Brazil where Max didn't give up the position for Checo. Max wasn't racing for anything at this point, really. And he wasn't going to win the race, and Checo needed that position. And he fucked him over. And Checo said, well, the gloves are off now. So I would really love to see Max versus Checo for the world championship. And I honestly think that this season, Checo shouldn't help Max. Because you know what? You stabbed the Minister of Defense in the back, and you're about to get the fucking teeth or the guitar in this point. That didn't make sense.
But I mean, it could be a detriment to the overall team success if they're constantly competing against each other. What if they make a mistake? What if they open themselves up to a Carlos Sainz or, you know, I would even say like a George Russell passing them up, taking P1, and then boom, that's it.
Well, that's a big thing. We don't think that a Red Bull is going to let Checo fight Max for the world championship. Definitely, they're going to tell him if they do let him fight, they're going to say, hey, don't fucking compromise the team's race just because you two have a petty argument, all right? So I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's just going to be Red Bull chasing Red Bull. That's it.
But if you're not going to race, if you're going to change things up, if you're not going to race Checo Perez, who else are you going to do? Daniel Ricciardo? I mean, you kind of need him because they play off of each other. You know, Max is, you know, the most aggressive driver in the grid. He's, you know, he drives angry. He's great at overtakes. And then Checo is the Minister of Defense, like you said. they work so well as a team. I really hope that they can just set all this aside, and whoever ends up winning the world championship, just be happy for the other guy. Next one. That means you have 2 world champion drivers on the same team. That's phenomenal. But,
Now, even though they won't be fighting for the world championship, I do think that we shouldn't just not watch this season because, it's going to be Max Verstappen just dominating in Red Bull, which it is. But I think we should watch it simply just to see who's going to be second, who's going to be third, and who might be fourth. Because it looks like Mercedes, and we talked about this earlier, Mercedes and Ferrari, those are the second and third best team in the grid. They might have their hands full because Fernando Alonso, even though he got P5, during free practice 2 and 3, he was at the top, beating out Max Verstappen on both occasions. So here's the thing. If it's the right track with the right conditions, because it happens, can Alonso win races in Aston Martin? And who's going to end up second and third? Is it going to be Ferrari, Mercedes again? Or is it going to be Mercedes, Ferrari? Or is it simply going to be Aston Martin says, fuck you guys, I'm being second, and it ends up being Red Bull, Aston Martin, Mercedes, and then Ferrari?
I think Fernando Alonso, in my eyes, I think this is the first time he's had a good car in a while. Do you agree with that? Or
I think you are right in that, because Alpine, they were unreliable as hell. The only reason why McLaren beat him last year was because the car was unreliable. How many DNFs did Fernando get? How many times did he have body parts flying off when it wasn't his fault for anything he caused? And this is another thing. That Renault engine is so fucking weak. It is the weakest power unit in the grid. He's now being powered by a Mercedes, which granted, it's not as fast as the Honda Red Bull powertrain engine, but it's still a fucking fast engine. Imagine if Max Verstappen, Checo Perez, and Fernando Alonso in P3.
those are my predictions, actually. I was going to ask you, what do you think the podium is going to look like tomorrow after the race? And that's my pick right now is P1 Max, P2 Checo, P3 Alonso, and, P4 Charles Leclerc. But that's my opinion.
Regardless, it's going to be interesting tomorrow and see what happens. Now, before we start talking about other things, I do want to talk about some other news in Formula One. And this one, well, the United Kingdom government isn't quite happy with the FIA and Formula One.
They're always not happy about a bunch of things, but explain further.
So in Formula One, as in other sports, have come under fire for having events in Middle East nations that are known for violating human rights. Normally, it's just comments on their Middle East circuit post, or when they comment like, we racist one, or we do not stand for discrimination, injustice, racism, all that stuff, which fair enough, that shouldn't be any of that. But people can comment on them saying, oh yeah, what about Saudi Arabia? What about Bahrain? And now members of the UK Parliament have started rumbling about Formula One and the FIA sport washing the actions of Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And that was an actual quote. Sport washing. Furthermore, a member of parliament said, use all available leverage to make representations to Bahrain for them to immediately and unconditionally release political prisoners. This is because Bahrain has the highest number of imprisonment in all the Middle East, with about 1,300 political prisoners. A spokesman for the FIA responded by saying, quote, the FIA, as in the case with other international sporting federations, cannot interfere with the internal affairs of a foreign state. This independence from the affairs of state, as underlined by the International Olympic Committee, does not mean, however, that we are insensitive to any potential hardships endured by the people concerned. End quote. In an interview with Formula One's CEO, Stefano Domenicali, he says that Formula One makes their stance on human rights clear with their partners and host countries. In other words, how much money can you give me to turn a blind eye? Because let's be real, these Middle East countries that they go to, they're run by rich billionaire tycoons who abuse their power, treat their people shit. And the only reason why they pay for Formula One to come to their countries is, one, probably the guy who paid for it. It's like, I like Formula One. I want to see it in my backyard, which, okay. but mostly because they want to change how people view the Middle East, especially in Saudi Arabia, where they've been doing that a lot.
I mean, and WWE does the same thing. I mean, we've seen the Saudi Arabian live events and all that kind of stuff. And it's one of those things, it is controversial. Like, why would you even hold a show there? But it's all about the money. And that's basically the reason why why Formula One will take it, why WWE will bite on those shows. Me personally, I do think it's a thing that needs to, kind of wind down, especially with WWE. I think the Saudi Arabian shows are way overdone. You don't need to have one once a year. You just don't.
Well, once a year would be a breath of fresh air. They go there like twice a year now.
Well, and it could be they're running out of places over here that will draw with WWE. But I'm not going to get in a whole topic about WWE. They're not on our list of things to talk about this week. Quite frankly, they probably never will be again because they suck.
And as for Formula One, there's a lot of circuits that people want them to go to, but they take the money from the Saudis because not just the Saudis, but Middle East countries will pay a shit ton of money to have their circuits be in the Formula One calendar because it's exposure for them, and people will fly to those circuits. For example, this year we have another Middle East circuit, Qatar, which we saw in 2020, but that was different. That was because we needed circuits because, pandemic shut down a lot of countries from Formula One entering. But it's a big thing, and I kind of find it a little bit hypocritical with fans who are, fuck the Middle East or fuck any of those nations who violate human rights, etc., etc. But at the same time, those are the same people who are going, you know what, Lewis Hamilton should shut the fuck up about Black Lives Matter. Or they should stop saying all this fucking political bullshit and all that. I think it's hypocritical because you want them to not be in the Middle East, which is a political statement, but at the same time, you don't want them or the drivers to make, as they say, woke political statements because you don't want sports to be about politics. It's hypocritical.
And I totally get what you're saying. You want them to be indifferent, but when they're indifferent, you make a big deal about it.
Exactly. And look, I'm in the crowd where I do believe they shouldn't go to Middle East nations, not because I care about human rights, which, just to make clear, I do care, but I care more about, I want to see good racing. I want to see the Nürburgring come back in Formula One or Hockenheim. I want to see races in Portimao. Basically, I just care about the racing. I don't really care about the political stuff because I can separate it from the sport, and that's the way I look at it. But like I always say, to each his own. All right, so let's hurry this along because we've been running long as it is. Now let's move aside from the glitz and the glamour of Formula One and talk about our backyard racing series. In the world of NASCAR, Cup Series driver Chase Elliott will be forced to miss the Las Vegas Motor Speedway race after suffering a leg injury while snowboarding in Colorado. The injury is bad enough that this past Friday, he was scheduled to have surgery on it. In his place this Sunday will be Xfinity driver Josh Berry. Berry has 5 Xfinity race wins to his name, as well as 2 Cup Series starts, in which his best result was P25 in Michigan during the 2021 season. For Chase, this will be the first time he will miss a race in the Cup Series since his full-time debut in 2016. This would have marked his 260th race start.
Yeah, I remember growing up watching Chase Elliott, and I mean, he is pretty good, and he's always been consistently good. So, I mean, it sucks that he's going to have to sit this one out, but man deserves a rest. He's been going for years.
Well, speaking about a man who has been going on for years, the hometown boy, Kyle Busch, will be racing in all 3 NASCAR racing events this weekend. So far, at the time of recording, he has won the Truck Series race, and he might win the Xfinity race, and seeing as his record proves that he might win the NASCAR Cup Series race, which would be incredible. I did not even know that you could participate in all 3 events if you were already in one of them. But I mean, he owns the team, so it's Kyle Busch Racing, so he could do whatever the fuck he wants.
That's honestly impressive. Like, what if he goes 3 for 3 and wins all 3? That, you could put him up there in some of the best drivers. He's already in talks of one of the best NASCAR drivers of all time, but I mean, he might be one of the best race drivers on the planet if that's the case.
All right, now, one final piece of news, and this is for all the fans of the World Endurance Championship. The the ex-NFL quarterback, Lord Tom Brady, I know Davis is going to love that, has announced that his clothing brand Brady is partnering up with Hertz Racing Gold as the official apparel sponsor, and the name of the brand is going to be in a car that will be featured in Le Mans, as well as in the other 6 other rounds, including 7 including Le Mans rounds of the World Endurance Championship. So what do you think about that? Old Tom Brady is getting into racing, and he announced it while being in a racing meal. What did you think about that?
I had no idea Tom was such a big racing fan. I mean, haven't Lewis Hamilton and Tom Brady met before though?
Monaco, I do believe, a few years ago.
Yeah. And, he needs something to do in retirement. He can't just focus on his kids and his wife, because Lord knows his wife would drive him crazy. But
Ex-wife,
yes. But yeah, I mean, good for him getting into something else, a complete other sport. He's also, I believe, he's going to start doing a little bit of commentating with ESPN or Sunday Night Football. We don't know yet. We're still working out the kinks on that deal. So,
another breaking news, Tom Brady has been announced as the new quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, God, no, please.
Well, that's pretty much all the sporting news I had. We already talked about Formula One. I got to do the race review and talk about it. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we sign off?
Well, you did tell me you had some questions for me regarding NFL. And it's a little bit of a change of pace, and it caught me off guard a little bit. But you did tell me you had questions.
It's going to be a long episode of post-production, I'll tell you that. But yes, I do have some questions. Thank you for reminding me. My first question, and this is actually something you and I talked about, and it's quite funny that we were talking about the Raiders. I made that joke without even realizing this. But is it a smart move for the Raiders to franchise tag Josh Jacobs? Because, look, granted, he is a great player when he's healthy, and he doesn't really have a good track record of being healthy all the time.
Well, this year he stayed pretty consistent. And this year, of course, he was the number one rusher in the league. I've got to give credit where credit's due. He might be the best running back in the league right now. We don't know. I give it one more year and see how he does this year. But to franchise tag him, who else are you going to put that franchise tag on?
Davante Adams.
Well, Davante Adams, you only put the franchise tag on him if their contract's about to come up. Davante Adams' contract is not anywhere close to being up,
which is something he regrets.
Now, Davante, he only came over here because he got out of the Packers franchise tagging him. So, it can be done to get out of it. But
which, by the way, and sorry for interrupting you so much, which, by the way, you pointed out when we covered this on the Waterboy Experience a few months back, that it was almost unheard of for a player to get out of a franchise tag.
It is unheard of. Usually it's like, you're locked in. Crap, I got to wait another year. But the good thing about this is Josh wants to be a Raider. He's said it multiple times. I believe that he would only think about leaving to get away from Josh McDaniels. That's my only thing. But where he is at right now, he's productive. He's the most productive running back in the league. I think staying here is the smartest move for him. And just to make sure that he stays here, I think it's a good idea to franchise tag him.
Well, anyway, let's move on to my second question. Out of all the quarterbacks the Raiders have talked to, who would be the best option? Now, I did jokingly say Tom Brady has now been announced as a new quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders, but realistically, who do you see as being a quarterback for the Raiders? Is it somebody who is in an NFL team right now? Is it a new prospect who just finished college and is going to be in the draft? Or are they going to stick to the same quarterback they have right now, which is, I believe, the backup quarterback for Carr?
Jared Stidham, yeah.
And also, Marcus Mariota was released by the Atlanta Falcons, which I was talking to one of my friends who's a Falcon fan, and he said, yeah, it's a damn good thing he was released. He was fucking shit with us. So are you guys going to go back to him after many years of essentially ignoring him and letting Carr play when he was choking? Like, who do you think is the best fit for the Raiders? Specifically, who do you think is a good fit for the style of coaching that McDaniels does or has or fails to have?
Well, I'll answer your last question this way. Nobody. If I'm going for just the best quarterback option, out of the ones that we've talked to CJ Stroud, we talked to Anthony Richardson. I firmly believe Anthony Richardson is going to be the best option. Right now, as we're talking right now, I look on Instagram. He's putting up fantastic numbers in the combine. Like, I think he just broke the long jump record for quarterbacks. Like, just completely smashed it. Now, there's no reason why a quarterback would need to jump that far, but you know what I mean. He's freakishly athletic. He can throw and he can run. He had great success at Georgia. I personally think if we want to keep up with the Patrick Mahomes of the world, with the Lamar Jacksons, the Jalen Hurts, I think Anthony Richardson would be our best option in the draft with our first round pick. So that's what I think.
Also, Lamar Jackson, apparently the rumors are coming out that his contract dealings with the Ravens aren't going really well for the Ravens. So is he a viable option? Because are you going to get that guy or are you going to get Lamar Jackson if he wants to come to Vegas?
Well, I mean, the big draw for quarterbacks to want to play with Vegas right now is Devontae Adams. Because, you know, of course you want to play with the best wide receiver in the league. He's going to make you look fantastic. I think Lamar would be a great option as well. And if I had to pick between Anthony Richardson and Lamar's been proven in the NFL already to be a great quarterback. He's a former MVP. I say get Lamar. Maybe you draft Anthony Richardson and let Anthony Richardson sit under Lamar and learn more about the game and stuff. But yeah, if I'm looking in the draft, it's Anthony Richardson. If I'm looking at free agency, assuming the talks fall through, it's going to be Lamar Jackson. I think we have to open up that aspect of the whole playbook and stretch the ball in every way possible on the offensive side.
Okay, so one final question, and I don't know how to word it perfectly fine, so I'll give it my best description. So what's going on with the quarterback push in the Super Bowl? Like, can you explain that to me in the audience? Because I don't really understand that, and, well, honestly, just give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so basically, there's a big writer in the NFL. He works for Sports Illustrated. His name is Peter King. Peter King is one of the greatest writers of all time. He basically came out and said in a podcast, they were talking about, there was a play where the Eagles essentially, they were on the 1 yard line, and essentially they kind of pushed Jalen Hurts into the end zone. Now, it's just a glorified quarterback sneak, and you have the guys behind him that give him an extra little boost into there. And he said it's a dumb play. It bastardizes the rules of the game and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of controversy over it right now. I'm in an Instagram thread. I think that's why you asked this question, because I told you I'm in an Instagram comment section on this post, and it's been going on for the past week to where it's just nothing but people arguing back and forth. I only made one comment and I never said anything else, but people are calling each other stupid and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, so it's got to be blowing up at some point. But basically, here's what I think about that play. And I'm not talking bad about the Chiefs at all, but if the Chiefs did it, everybody would say that it was a smart play. It's only because somebody else did it. Which, I mean, it is a smart play. If the Chiefs did it, yeah, it's smart. The play itself is it's like the basic fundamentals of football itself, because it's the nitty gritty. It's like the rough and tough football, to where everybody just gets in the trenches, they fight. It's just about who's stronger and who wants it more. And basically, my theory is people don't like it because they think it's a boring play. But also, it happened against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I think people also think it's kind of unfair to do that. But ever since the sport was an actual sport, people have been making that play. And it's always been one of the common things, you hand the ball off or the quarterback takes the ball himself. Everybody fights to get him into the end zone, no matter what. And what happens in the trenches, you can't really police what goes on there. And that's what kind of makes the play cool, because it's just about who's tougher and who's willing to fight more for that last little inch. Because, I mean, it is a game of inches. And don't even think about making a dick joke, Jason. And I think it's one of those things where you have to fight for every last inch. And so I think it's a smart play. I don't think it should be outlawed at all. Maybe the pushing factor, maybe you should have a limit of guys pushing on him or something. I don't know. But I think Peter King is just wrong. So.
All right, folks. So I'm back with the Formula One race review. And quite frankly, it wasn't really an exciting race. There were some great moments, but overall, it wasn't that great. To start off, Max Verstappen, when the light turned green, he hit the accelerator and he ran off into the sunset. You never saw him. quite literally, you almost never saw him because he was so far ahead of everybody else that the broadcast barely panned to him throughout the race, because there was like a 30 to 50 second deficit to him and Checo Perez, who was in P2, which, speaking of, Checo Perez didn't have the greatest of starts, and he actually fell back, and he was behind Charles Leclerc, and him and Leclerc had a few fights until the first round of pit stops where Checo and Charles pitted, and Checo managed to overtake Charles. Now, Charles, on the other hand, he wasn't really having a great race weekend. Ferrari wasn't as fast as they expected, and they are not going to repeat their success they had in Bahrain last year. And quite frankly, they continue their awfulness from last season to this season. And I say this because prior to the race, they realized, oh shit, something's wrong with Charles Leclerc battery elements. And you only get 2 allocations throughout the entire season. They're supposed to last the entire season. So Ferrari goes, all right, so this is a bad batch, so we're going to have to go to our second allocation, which means if he needs a third, he's getting a penalty. And they switch to the second, and on lap 41 or 42 of the race, Charles Leclerc's car completely dies. Now, the engine didn't blow up like it did in Austria, but the car just came to a steady halt. And honestly, that's just Ferrari. Like, it's so Ferrari to fuck up. And it's so much like Ferrari to fuck up at the very beginning of the season. So now some fans are saying, no, wait, this is a good thing because last year, Charles won the Bahrain Grand Prix. Max didn't even finish, and Charles didn't win the world championship, and Max did. So some fans are saying, well, this is a trend. You know, Lewis Hamilton never won the race in Bahrain, but he went on to win the world championship. They're calling it the curse of Bahrain, but it's just nonsense. Quite frankly, Charles Leclerc is not going to be competitive against Max Verstappen, and I said it during the preseason episode. Ferrari isn't going to be good until at least next year, and they're going to really take a hit this year because as of today, March 9th, lead aerodynamicist, or the guy in charge of the aerodynamics of the car, he quit. He literally quit and has gone to McLaren, which is great for McLaren. Hopefully they could do better than they did today. But if they just lost their main guy for the aerodynamics of the car, which I'm sure includes the underfloor, which is a major part of the car, then I'm guessing they're not going to do real well the rest of the season, especially when it comes to upgrades. So that's just Ferrari. Now, somebody who we have to give a shit ton of props to, and I almost kind of called it earlier in the episode because the race finish was Max Verstappen P1, Checo Perez P2, and Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso P3. He achieved his 99th podium in Formula 1, which is a freaking amazing stat. And he was fighting Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, and he beat Lewis Hamilton so bad. And one of the things they were talking about after the race, Mercedes that is that they've kind of given up on their car. Essentially, Toto Wolff, when they asked him about it, he's like, I think we're going to have to make radical changes to the car because it's not working. And Lewis Hamilton went on an interview and he said, yeah, you know, I kind of think Mercedes should own up and say, you know what, Lewis, we were wrong. You were right, because Lewis was against the concept of the car for Mercedes this past 2 years. Well, year and a half. So he hasn't been happy with the car at all. And now even Toto Wolff is saying, yeah, it's not working out. Because I am 100% certain that the deficit to Max Verstappen in P1 and Lewis Hamilton in P5 was 54 seconds. So from the looks of it, Mercedes isn't going to be challenging Red Bull. And honestly, their biggest challenge is going to have to be Aston Martin, because Lance Stroll divided the Mercedes and he was sixth, right between Lewis and George Russell. And here's the thing about Lance Stroll. He hit Fernando Alonso's car. Like, quite literally, at the beginning of the race, they go into turn one and Fernando brakes maybe a little bit too squirrely, let's say. And Lance Stroll doesn't have enough time and he hits the back of the car. Luckily, nothing, as far as we're aware of, broke off and damaged Fernando's car. But his race engineers wouldn't tell him who hit him. And he didn't know. And I'm pretty sure they told him, yeah, towards the end, it was Lance. And then during the interviews, he was still very complimentary of Lance and all that. So fans are saying, well, he's probably getting a bonus for every time he says a good thing about Lance, because Fernando does not have the nicest history with his teammates. In a way, he's a bit like Esteban Ocon, and he'll badmouth them if he needs to, and he doesn't fucking care if he's doing it in private or in public. So he's probably getting paid a lot. But yes, Fernando did really amazing, finish P3. Like I said, he beat Lewis Hamilton, he beat George Russell, and he got ahead of Carlos Sainz, and that was a big thing. And it also shows another problem with the Ferrari, because towards the end of the race, Carlos Sainz race engineer was telling him, push harder. And Carlos said, if I push any harder, these tires won't make it till the end of the race, which shows that Ferrari is still dealing with a major tire degradation problem. Yeah, and next weekend is going to be the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which is a track that doesn't have a lot of tire degradation problems, which will benefit the Ferraris, and it's a lot about straight line speed. So they said they're a little bit stronger there, so it might help them, but still, it's still a major problem with Ferrari. And again, I don't think they're going to be a world championship contenders this year. Maybe next year, but definitely not this year. Aston Martin, I don't see him challenging Red Bull at all. Now, they are definitely going to challenge Ferrari, and they're definitely going to challenge Mercedes. And the big question is, will they hold up? Because it's one thing if you come in hot and you're like, oh, they're crazy fast and all this, but you got to keep that momentum up. We know that this is something that a lot of teams have trouble with, because if you look at Haas, who, by the way, they did not do great at all. They, last year, were hot. Kevin Magnussen came in P6, boom, or it was a P5, something like that. But they couldn't keep that trend up. And towards the end, they weren't even fighting for fucking points. They were just fighting for finishes. They were lucky if they got a P10. So they might have the momentum right now, but can they keep it up? Now, another interesting thing about Aston Martin and Mercedes is the fact that Aston Martin got all this performance out of their car when they share a lot of components that Mercedes uses. So essentially in Formula One, there's a limited amount of parts that you can use from your supplier. So they're buying the engines off Mercedes, the gearboxes, and I do believe the suspension off Mercedes. And they're using Mercedes wind tunnel. So they're using a lot of components that Mercedes created and designed for their car, and they're giving it to Aston Martin. And Aston Martin is able to bring out more out of those parts than Mercedes can. And I think that's something that Mercedes is not happy about, because they're using our own fucking wind tunnel, and why the fuck aren't we higher? So that's something that's very interesting, and Aston Martin won't have to rely on that wind tunnel for much longer, because they're building their own wind tunnel and they're building brand new facilities. So from the looks of it, maybe they won't be as hot as they are right now at the end of the season, but I do believe that in the following years, Aston Martin will do really great things, because Lawrence Stroll is putting in a lot of money into getting brand new facilities, getting better engineers, and just doing anything he can to make that a dominant team. Do I think they're going to be the most dominant team since Mercedes? Probably not. But I think in the future, they're definitely going to give Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari a fight for the title. Now, somebody who we have to talk about, who we didn't really talk a lot about earlier in this episode and last episode, is Alpine. Now, first off, I have to say Pierre Gasly, he made chicken salad out of chicken shit. Like I said earlier, during quali, his time was deleted and he ended up being P20. And then he crawled his way up to P9. And Esteban Ocon, his teammate, on the other hand, God, if there was a race he wants to forget, it's that one. So before the race even starts, when they're doing the warm-up lap, they're supposed to get back into the grid positions. Esteban Ocon parks the car right, but then he's looking somewhere else because they revisited on the onboard camera. He looks somewhere else, and I think he let go of the brake, and the car moves forward just a little bit, enough to be out of the grid box. And the FIA goes, well, that's not fucking right. You get a 5-second time penalty. And he complains about it over the radio when they tell him, because he's like, I've been in Formula One this many years. I've never done it wrong. What the fuck? But if you look on the onboard camera, yeah, he kind of fucked up a little bit and he didn't realize it. So he gets a 5-second time penalty. When he goes to do his first pit stop, Well, one of the mechanics grabs his gun and unfastens one of the tires before the 5 seconds. Now they've got somebody telling them, but the guy reacted too early, and essentially he got another 5-second time penalty to serve on top of his 5-second time penalty. So in total, it was 10 seconds. And then when he came in to serve that one, he was caught speeding in the pit lane. Now, in Formula One cars, there's a speed limit that they have to, and basically in every car, there's a speed limit you have to go in the pit lane. And then they have the special button where they press it, and then it activates the car so it doesn't go over the speed limit. But he pressed it too late as he got it in, and he was caught speeding, and he got another 5-second time penalty, which is freaking ridiculous. He matched the record of the most penalties in a single race, which was 3, and it was put by Pastor Maldonado, who I'm going to make an episode about that guy because it's so interesting how he lasted so long in Formula One and how he got to Formula One with the amount of penalties and crashes he had. Staying on the topic of pit stops and bad pit stops, McLaren. Now, Oscar Piastri, debut season, everybody's looking at this kid. He replaced Daniel Ricciardo, and Alpine was fighting to keep him, and all this stuff. So we were all looking forward to see this kid. Let's see what this new Aussie kid has in store. Well, unfortunately for him, he had a problem with shifting gears, and it was actually due to the steering wheel. So they pit him in order to change the steering wheel. Now, they've done this in the past. Most famously, Lewis Hamilton did it, I think, in his debut season. And they go and change the wheel, and he can't go. Why? Because it's booting up. Apparently, nobody rebooted the computer beforehand. So he had to wait a little bit, and then later on, they just boxed him and retired the car. Now, Lando Norris, on the other hand, boy oh boy, I think he matched the record for the most pit stops in a single race. He went into the pit stops 6 times. All right, 6 freaking times. At the end, he was just at the bottom, and he was fighting the Mercedes, the Ferraris, and the Aston Martins just because he wanted to unlap himself. But essentially, they were having a bit of an issue, and they had to blow some type of air into the car, and they had to do that repeatedly. And quite honestly, I just don't know why they didn't retire the car at that point. It's sad seeing McLaren go where they are. And then after the race, they were talking about it. And Zach Brown says, I do believe that with the new wind tunnel, we're going to be better. Yada. Quite frankly, I think it's a load of bollocks because they've been promising that since 2007. I genuinely believe that they're just shit. That's it. They're the new Williams, and that's the meme going around. Now you're the new Williams. So McLaren is very disappointing, and honestly, if you're a McLaren fan, I wouldn't watch this season, or I would switch to a different team because it's just going to be heartbreak. It's the same as Ferrari fans. Hey, look, you have something in common. But overall, that was the Formula One race in Bahrain. Like I said, there was not a lot of things to talk about. Haas ended up almost dead last. Nick DeVries did pretty good, and Logan Sargent ended up being close to the points. I think he was right behind Alex Albon, who was P10. And yeah, it was an okay race. Wasn't the best race. I hope that Jeddah brings a better race. Even Max Verstappen says, yeah, I don't think we're going to be as quick in Jeddah as we were in Bahrain, just because the tire degradation doesn't come into play. But I still say he's going to win the Formula One season. I think at this point, they shouldn't even be fighting for P1 in the Constructors and Drivers' Championship, and they should just hand the title to Red Bull and Max Verstappen. That's the truth. But anyway, let's go to Davis and pass me and let them sign us off. But anyway, we've been dragging this out too long. All right, so how about you sign us off, white boy? Well, sign us off right now because you'll hear me talk before this. So yeah, sign us off, Davis.
Well, actually, I want to say one last thing. We do have breaking news. I'm kidding. We don't actually have breaking news. I was just going to see your reaction. But anyway, thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Waterboy Experience. We hope you enjoyed it. And peace.
Second and goal just outside the 10. Hart tips it in, and it's Waller. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. this on one end in LeBron.